All right. Welcome to day 13. And we're reading Job. And this book is tough, man. It opens with the Satan, the adversary. We don't know if it's the devil incarnate, like the devil himself. I tend to love everything that Mike Heiser writes. I quote him all the time in this book, the 30-Day Shred book, because he's a freak. If you haven't read Unseen Realm, you have to. My brother disagrees with me. I don't care. I think that Heiser is correct with respect to how God rules. He has there's ruling class angels, and they're sort of like an aristocracy. They're called the sons of God, the Elohim angels. And God has like a council, and he rules with these guys, and they're called lowercase gods. And we see this in the book of Psalm, throughout the Psalms. And what it looks like in the book of Job, by the way, Job is the oldest book in the Bible, is that God is he's got his council, his ruling council, and the angels have free will, just like us. They are free will moral agents. And they got some critiques, just like we do. Or they have some questions. And so this lawyer or this cross-examiner, this prosecutor gets up, called the Satan, and the adversary. And he's like, God, the only reason why Job loves you is because you're protecting him. And if something bad were to happen to him, he'd lose his faith. And that's a pretty fair critique. You know, it's like, do humans only fear God and love him because good things happen because he protects them? Or will they love him in spite of it? You know, like, are they capable of faith, believing that God is, even when bad things are happening? You know, that kind of Abrahamic faith where things aren't always rolling good, but you're trusting that God is going to be God. And even if bad things happen, you're still like, the Lord is just and he's right and his ways are perfect and he's always good, even if I'm in a bad situation. I mean, it's crazy kind of faith. And so, and this is one of the oldest questions, I think, in the Bible. In fact, I don't think it's strange that the oldest book in the Bible asks the hardest question in the Bible. Is God good even when life's not? And is God worth trusting even when I'm dying? And what's the point of suffering?
In a time where truth is under attack through distraction, disinformation, and the chaos of postmodern ideologies, it's vital for us as Christians to strengthen our faith through education. Theosu delivers a distilled Bible college experience for all Christians right in your pocket. Binge like Netflix or join cohorts for guided study. From full-time church staff to Christians in any vocation, Theosu fits your life and calling. Equip yourself, your church, and your ministry with courses on all aspects of the Christian faith, taught by leading scholars, ministers, theologians, and apologists. Come learn non-woke theology at Theosu.
If you spend any time on TikTok or Instagram, there's going to be a lot of people trying to tell you the purpose of suffering. And I recently taught a class at Austin Christian University on suffering with Dr. Chris Palmer. Him and I split the class, and there were 6 lessons, 6 different, well, not 6 lessons, but 6 different theories that we examined on suffering. I'm not going to go into them here, but is this why suffering happens? Is this why suffering happens? And this question of, it's called theodicy in the theological language. Why does suffering happen? And at the end of the class, you're sort of left with like, I don't know if any of these theories satisfy or really answer the idea of suffering. You know, like, yeah, it's all a bit of it's a bit of a wash, because suffering doesn't always teach you anything. Suffering isn't always redemptive. You know, like, how is a baby dying of bone cancer teaching that baby anything? It's not. And so surely there are times when we suffer that we can learn things. But what if I told you that sometimes there's suffering that seems just entirely and totally pointless, and we don't know. Would that ruin your faith? Like, do we have to have neat, tidy answers for everything? I don't know. And the book of Job is asking this question. And so God's like, okay, cool. Let's see if Job can have faith in me if things go bad. And so God allows this adversary to essentially torture Job, and to test, essentially not to test his faith, because I don't think that Job's faith needed testing, which is kind of it messes with your head, because God wasn't the one that was necessarily doing it. It was this other guy, this adversary that was doing it. God didn't strike Job with boils. God didn't kill his family. But this angel who has free will, moral agency, did all these things, and God sort of allowed him to do it, which is crazy. And is God guilty of it because he allowed it? Which is a whole other can of beans. But all that to say, Job's just like, if God kills me, I'll still praise him. So that's, if you want to examine my faith, here's the bottom of it. The bottom of it is there's nobody else that I could worship, and then so really it's not Job that's on trial, it's God that's on trial. That's the book of Job. The book of Job is not, God, once again, the adversary is saying he only loves you because you're protecting him. The adversary is not putting Job on trial. He's putting God on trial. So it's kind of like, have you ever seen like a sadistic little kid who's like torturing somebody, but he's looking at the parent to see what the parent's going to do? Not necessarily looking at the kid and torturing him to see what he's going to do. You know what I'm talking about? That's kind of what's happening. The adversary is poking Job and then just looking at God going, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? So God on trial is kind of like it's the oldest question. Why do we exist? What's the purpose to life? And why do bad things happen in this life? Why do you allow these things to happen? And God kind of answers because he's on trial. So he's answering both Job and the adversary in his counsel. And what he's going to say to them is like, you weren't there when I did all of this. You don't know anything. You're basically an idiot. And that's God's answer. God's answer is you're a worm. It's like me trying to explain to a worm how to use an iPhone. Like the distance between me as an intelligent human being, made in the image of God, and a worm that has a form of intelligence but doesn't have the capabilities that I have. And I'm trying to explain the difference between me and a worm. That the gap between God and me is far much greater. So I'm never going to, once again, I can never know God exhaustively. I can know him accurately. And there's some things that I'm going to be able to understand, but there's some things I will never understand. And I will just have to trust. I think that eternity is going to require faith. Because I don't think that when I see God, I will have figured him out. And I don't believe that seeing is believing. Because the demons believe that God exists. But they're still demons. Figure that one out. Right? They're still in rebellion. So faith has never been about recognizing whether or not God actually exists. It's all about having to put your trust eternally in somebody that you will never fully understand. And it's a denial of your own self-reliance. It is coming to the end of the existential question and realizing the limits of your own capabilities and your own ability to negotiate intellectually what is happening. And at that moment of clarity, you're like, yeah, no, you're right. God provides God's answers. Chesterton said that the answers of the riddles of God are more satisfying than the answers of man. And God just answers Job and his council, the Elohim angels, with riddles. Were you there when I made dragons? No. Oh, no, you weren't. Yeah. Were you there when I made you? No. Oh, no, you weren't. Interesting. Were you there when I made the worlds? Oh, no, you weren't. Do you know how those animals that I made work? You can observe them, but you don't know. You understand how a flying squirrel flies? Do you understand how an eagle soars? Like how that works? Oh, you don't. Interesting. So he just goes. He basically just is like, oh, you don't know this. Oh, you don't know this. You don't know this. You don't know this. You don't know this. Oh, you don't know anything. So how would you understand the suffering if you can't even answer these questions? And it just brings us back to a place where we're like, yeah, actually, we'll never know a lot about life. There's a lot about life that I will never know. How much more what is right and what is wrong? And it brings me back to a place where I have to trust God. And that's kind of what the book of Job is about.